Good morning, Clearbranch kids. As you know, this month we're learning all about forgiveness. And since the beginning of the school year, we've been going all through the Bible and hearing all kinds of great stories from God's big story, the Bible. And last few months actually, we've been talking about the stories that have taken place during Jesus' ministry. But today is a little bit different. This is not a story about Jesus, but rather it's a story that Jesus told. See, we know that Jesus traveled all over teaching and preaching and trying to talk to people about the love of God and the different kind of relationship that they could have with God. But sometimes Jesus could tell that people weren't getting it, and so he would use a story and tell this story as a way of explaining what he was trying to say. And that's what happened today. So see, one day, one of his disciples, Peter, came up to him and he said, "Jesus, I have a really big question. How many times should I forgive someone who does wrong against me?" He said, "Maybe up to 7 times? That seems like a lot to Peter, so he thought surely 7 would be enough. But Jesus replied, 70 times 7. Now, Jesus wasn't really talking about the number 70 times 7. His point was that you should forgive others as many times as it takes. But that kind of blew their minds, and he could tell that the people listening didn't really get what he was trying to say. And so he said, "Let me tell you a story. See, there was a king, and this king was kind of like the kingdom of heaven. And the king had decided to call in different servants who owed him money and start getting paid back for some of the things that he owed. And so this particular day, this man came in and he owed the king 10,000 bags of gold. That's a lot. There's no way this man would ever be able to repay it in his lifetime. And so as the king asked him if he had the money, and he said no, he didn't. And so the king said, "You will have to be sold, you and your family, to pay back the debts that you owed." Well, the man was devastated, as you might can imagine. So he begged for mercy from the king. He said, "Please don't do that. Please don't sell us off. I will work as hard as I can. I'll do everything I can to pay this money back to you." Well, the king knew there was no way this was going to happen, but he felt sorry for the guy. He felt compassion for him. And so he decided that he would show mercy and he would forgive the debt that this man owed, and he let him go on about his way. Well, the man was celebrating. He was overjoyed. He just had this massive debt forgiven. But then listen to what happens next. As soon as he left there, he went and he found another fellow servant who owed him some coins, just some silver coins, not nearly the amount, nowhere near the debt that this man had owed the king. And he said he demanded to have his money paid back, and even picked the man up by the neck and shook him. And when the man couldn't pay him back, he had him thrown in jail. Well, some other servants saw this happen, and they were so upset. They couldn't believe that this man had been forgiven this huge, massive debt, and then had thrown someone else in jail for owing just a teeny tiny fraction of that. So they went and told the king, and the king could not believe it. So he called the first servant back into him, and he said, "How could you do that? When I have shown you mercy, how could you not show mercy to someone else in return?" He said, "For that, you're going to have to suffer your original punishment." And so he had the man thrown in jail. And after Jesus finished telling the story, he turned and looked to everyone and he said, "See, my Father in heaven is like that king. If you're not going to show the forgiveness that he shows you to other people, then you won't be able to be forgiven as well." That's a lot to think about. They were simply looking for a number, but they learned that day from Jesus that there is no set amount of times that we should forgive. But instead, just like our bottom line for this week says, we should always forgive others just as God has forgiven us.